Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Wednesday morning here, 6 o'clock in the morning, December the 1st. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. The chat room is open, and I popped the link in there that we're talking about. That's Myths About Domestic Abuse from Dave Decker, angerresources.com. www.angerresources.com, ANGERESOURCES, angerresources.com. So that's what we're looking at, and we're working our way towards the end of this article, but the end of this webpage. But it's some good info, and I think everyone really should check this out. You know, if you have time to go and actually go to that link, check out all the articles there by Dave Decker and Michael Obsatz. It's a great website full of all kinds of information. We won't cover it all. We've already been on this website for about 5 weeks, but the info is so good because I know so many people have issues with anger-related problems, you know, like road rage and getting angry at their family for the smallest infractions and getting mad at their coworkers, getting angry at their bosses, getting angry. Anger is normal and it's natural, and like Dave Decker explains, you know, that anger is good. It's a normal response, and we will get angry, and that's fine, but we need to learn how to not be abusive and also to not be passive and stuff it, right? We need to learn how to be assertive without becoming abusive, and I think that a lot of people could use this. There's a whole lot of people out there who get angry and kill people, you know, all because they were angry about something, and it's like, well, if they would just stop for a minute and think about, you know, the fact that maybe they need some anger management, you know, help and therapy, well then, you know, this world would be a lot better place, I think. So I wish everybody would go and take a look at this website. It's very much helpful for me just to see this stuff because I had my own anger issues, and it's good to see this stuff, you know, to learn how to manage our anger. There's one more article on here that I want to take a look at, and that is managing our own anger. And then I think we'll move on from there. But it's just a great website. I hope you will go check it out. We could probably spend a year on it just because there's so much info. So that's why I hope everybody will go check out that website. And so that's what we're going to talk about. I'm not a counselor or therapist, you know. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen bringing out this information because I'm on my healing journey as a survivor of child abuse, and I also, you know, wanted to sort of just be one more voice speaking out against abuse and speaking up about, you know, what happens to children and when they're abused, and then later on as an adult what some of us have to cope with. And, you know, we're all different and we've all been through different things, but it's all horrible, and it's like it never should have happened. But unfortunately, we can't change the past, but we can change how we feel about ourselves, and we can change how we feel about this life, you know. And there's things that we can do that's very proactive, and that is to change how we feel about ourselves and about the past and about our lives, you know. And we can't go back and change it, that's for sure. But we can change how we feel now, and we can work towards our healing, right? So whatever you have to do to get help, you know, whether it's calling a crisis line, getting involved with, you know, online therapy, group therapy, a counselor, therapist, whatever works for you, you know. But just so that everybody, we all know that there's help out there, and that we don't have to continue to suffer in silence and sadness, right? Which is what I was doing for many, many years, and that's why I'm doing these shows, right? So yeah, you have to listen at your own discretion. All of my shows, you know, I'm covering the topics of abuse, and abuse is very sensitive. It's a sensitive topic for a lot of people. So make sure that you're in a safe enough place where you can listen to this show that, you know, you feel you wouldn't hurt yourself or hurt someone else. It is really ultimately your discretion. So please listen at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my show, because children under the age of 18, you know, you have the right to protection at all times. And when there's a chat room present, you really have to know how to keep yourself safe in a chat room. And also, a lot of the content on my shows is very much adult content, very much mature. Even though I'm talking about stopping child abuse, it's ultimately about helping to save children's lives, almost all of my shows. But the thing is, you know, children should have the right to protection at all times. And so I want people under the age of 18 to make sure that you have permission to listen to my show. Ask, you know, an adult or someone who you trust, and who hopefully you have a parent who cares, or someone in your life who cares about you, who can listen to the show with you, and make sure that, you know, it's okay for you to listen to, because I don't know how young the people are who are listening to my shows. So thanks very much, everybody. So we'll get right into this article, and this is Myths About Domestic Abuse. And we're sort of we're making our way through the article here, and we're on, we left off on myth number 24, which is yesterday, which is abusers are out of control, crazy, mentally ill, and aren't really responsible for what they do or have done This is myths about abusive men, right? This one section. And the reality is that the vast majority of batterers do not have either thought disorders or impulse control disorders that create an actual break from reality. In fact, men have learned to use violence to control people and situations around them and make clear choices, although they may not be conscious of these until they begin treatment, about where, how, and when they become abusive with their partners and others. So, it's not that they're out of control, crazy, mentally ill, or aren't responsible for what they're doing, right? Abusers do know what they're doing. They may not realize some of it, like Dave Decker was saying here, until they begin treatment. But it's a learned, behavior. They learn to use violence to control people and situations around them, and they make these choices to do it, right? And that's very, very sad, but that's what people do. So that's where we left off. And myth number 25, we'll start here. Abusers are generally explosive and violent people, and a woman should have been able to tell that a man would be abusive. The reality is that Dave Decker says, although batterers may have a history of generalized violence, there often comes a point in their lives when they become person-specific and focus on abusing their partner, and at times their children. Frequently, when they first meet a prospective partner, they are loving, charming, caring, and attentive, and even later in the marriage, they are not abusive at all times. And that's just the case, for a lot of people. People get into these relationships, and it's just the honeymoon phase, right? Everybody's happy. They're in this new relationship. It's great and wonderful, and everybody's on their best behavior trying to impress the other one, And it's like, and then after a while, especially after they're married, or they might be seeing each other for quite some time and move in together, and then things change, and all of a sudden these two people, if one's going to be abusive, then they'll start to see some of this abusive behavior as the relationship progresses, and it's sad, but it's true. Many women don't know that they're marrying or that they're living with or dating an abusive person, abusive man, or an abusive partner, right? So and many, this is the same case for men. With women, women might be on their best behavior and while they're dating and courting, dating, and seeing each other, and then when they get married, it all changes, and then the woman might become very much possessive and, controlling, and then become abusive, right? You just, a lot of times we don't know this about somebody, and that can happen. It's very, very sad. And even later in the marriage, like he says here, they're not abusive at all times, and that's true because mainly it's a cycle that they go through. The power and control wheel, if you go and check those out, there's lots of websites, but if you type into your browser power and control wheel, or domestic violence wheel, or abuse of women wheel, or child abuse wheel, you can pull up all these wheels that show the cycle of violence, the cycle of abuse, and it is very much a cycle. And they go through these periods, where abusers will abuse either their wife or their husband, and there'll be this honeymoon phase, right? They'll apologize and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I do these things because I've got a problem, and they manipulate the person who they've been abusing with their partner, and then the partner starts to feel sorry for them, and it's okay, and I know you didn't mean to hurt me, and then there's a nice little honeymoon phase there, and everybody's there could be a period of time where they're getting along, and the abuser's making every attempt to make this person believe that they are sorry and that they will change, and then they start the cycle all over again. They start the threats, they start the abuse, and it goes in a cycle, right? So there's times when the marriage or the relationship actually might be okay, and then the abuse starts again. So it's absolutely horrible. I just I don't know. I just can't believe the people. I've seen such horrific things in my lifetime. People doing horrible things to each other. Friends as well, not just only in my own family, but friends of mine that were in these relationships that were so abusive, and I was quite often trying to protect my friend, and one friend of mine especially, but another friend of mine was murdered, like I was talking about yesterday, in a domestic violence assault. But my other friend, her partner, who she was living with, he was so highly abusive to her, and she was abused as a child, and watched her mother be abused, and just really didn't realize that she really should make a change and actually get out, even though she knew that it was wrong, and she was really wanting to kill this guy for what he was doing to her, because he was abusing her, extremely badly, right? And the thing is I was trying to protect her, and then of course my life was in jeopardy because this guy felt that I was a threat, because obviously I was a threat to him because I was trying to protect his girlfriend, who was my best friend. So the thing is, absolutely horrific what people do to each other. I mean, my God, it's not cool. If you're in this situation, make sure that you get yourself out, get yourself some help, and be very, very careful what you're doing, and get some good advice from a domestic violence counselor, somebody who knows about domestic violence, a professional who can give you some options, you know what I mean, on what you can do, right? Because you do not deserve to be abused. I don't care what anybody says. That's absolutely ridiculous for people to be treating people that way, and people to allow people to treat them that way, right? Myth number 26, abusers are mean and cruel at all times with their partners and their children. For example, abusers are never loving partners or good fathers. And that's a myth. The reality, Dave Decker says here, is abusers go through a cycle of violence and can be at times, especially during the honeymoon or deception phase. Oh, that's what we were just talking about. Loving, nurturing, playful, attentive, sensitive to their partner's needs, exciting and affectionate. Some batters abuse their children, some do not. So that's just the thing, right? They're not always mean and cruel at all times with their partners and their children, not always. Maybe some are. But the majority of them, I think, aren't, and that's why, the abuse just gets to continue on and on and on, right? Because there's a cycle of violence, and they can keep this person. This is the way they control the situation. They can keep this person, intimidated enough and in enough fear that they'll stay, and then of course they'll play this whole game of, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this, or I didn't mean to hurt you, or whatever. And then they, it's all this honeymoon phase, and then all of a sudden they're back at the abuse. Horrible. And even if there's no physical abuse, sometimes there's people just think that abuse is only abuse if it's physical abuse, and that's just not the reality. That's not the truth, because there's so many, there's all abuse is damaging. It doesn't matter whether it's physical or not. Now, physical abuse, especially if it's life-threatening, is very damaging because it can kill a person. But the whole psychological, emotional, verbal abuse, that can kill a person too, because it kills them inside. You know what I mean? It kills the person inside, their spirit, their soul, their very being, just being verbally assaulted, emotionally assaulted, made to feel that they're crazy, psychologically abused. It's absolutely horrible what that does to people. It's extremely hard to get over. The scars that happen from that kind of abuse actually run a lot deeper, because that's what really hurts. It's a heart, it crushes people's hearts, And so it's, the physical abuse is horrible too. And if there's physical abuse, there will always be psychological, emotional damage, done, mental, psychological damage done when there is physical abuse happening, because it goes hand in hand. But there may not always be physical abuse, but if somebody's psychologically abusing someone. But the thing is it's horrible. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the thing is that, abusers aren't always mean and cruel at all times, right? So that's the thing. They go through these little phases, and it's just horrible. Yeah, absolutely. Myth number 27, abusive men will stop being abusive on their own. That's a myth. The reality, occasionally men are able to stop being violent on their own due to the potential for significant consequences, which is arrest, jail time, court involvement. However, effectively addressing the controlling attitudes and the emotional and verbal abuse that arise from these attitudes can best be accomplished in a treatment setting where abuse and control are the focus of the intervention. So that's the thing. Not all men can stop themselves. Not all women can stop themselves from being abusers, because they have learned these behaviors somewhere, in their lifetime, whether it was in their own childhoods or their own life, and then don't know how to work through them, don't know how to change, but some probably do know how to change, but some probably don't. They need therapy, they need help, they need treatment, they need to learn, how to manage their anger effectively without hurting people, and that, to stop their controlling attitudes, right? Because that's what it is. Abuse is all about control. It's about controlling somebody. It's about controlling the issue, the situation. It's making people do what you want them to do and using whatever means necessary to make them do that, right? So, that's ridiculous and that's horrible. And but it is a lot of it's a learned behavior. I don't know how much of it's a learned behavior, but I know that just about every website out there says that abuse is a learned behavior, and it's definitely a choice. People don't have to abuse. They're making a clear choice to do it, right? And that's sad. People think that people are just, out of control, he lost control, she lost control, and that has nothing, it's not a loss of control, it's a means of control. So people need to learn how to change their behaviors if they're really going to change. And many times women think, or even men think, well, if I'm good enough or I love this person enough, they'll stop abusing me. I can get them to treat me right. And that's just not the case. You can probably never be good enough or do anything right enough to make somebody change their behavior if they feel that it's working for them to abuse you, because that's what's working for them and they know how to do it. And if they grew up watching someone in their home being battered and abused, or even just emotionally, fully abused, they may take that role on. A lot of times, especially men and boys do. Boys will take that role on if they see their own father abusing their mother or people in the home. They sort of can take on the role. They don't always. That's a fact. Because not everybody who's been around abuse will become abusive. And not everybody who's been abused will become abusive. It's just that it does tend to be a problem. It does tend to be an issue. Because they do the studies and they talk to these people and, they find out just what kind of a home they grew up in. And many times, there would have been domestic violence and abuse, family violence involved, and then the child just learns and grows up in that and thinks that that's the way that they handle things, right? So, it works with men and women, right? It doesn't matter. But Dave Decker's specifically addressing men here. But he also talks about, the whole issue of women and as being abusers as well. So, myth number 28, abusers can never change. The reality, that's Dave Decker, that's a myth. Abusers can never change. The reality, because abuse is a learned behavior, it can be unlearned. Most batterers witnessed or experienced control and abuse in their families of origin and can stop the violence and decrease the verbal and emotional abuse through consequences and or by attending a treatment program that specifically addresses these issues. So, it's not that abusers can never change. It's just that they have to really, I think they have to want to. They have to want to change. It's just like anybody else, people who are, using drugs or alcoholics, they have to want to change. It's like anything that we're doing that we know we shouldn't be doing that is hurtful or harmful to other people or even ourselves. We have to want to change that. Otherwise it's not going to happen. So the abusers, they can change. Abusive people, they can change, but they have to want to, and they have to see a reason to, you know what I mean? And that's why I think people think, oh well, my partner, he must, he loves me or she loves me, even though they're abusing me and battering me. And I just can't see how, honestly, to be honest with you, I don't see how that can be true. Because if you really truly love somebody, then you would get help. You know what I mean? Like if a parent who truly loved their children would not do what they do to them and abuse them and sexually use them and think that it's okay, even though they know they're hurting that child because that child is screaming out in pain and the child is crying and pleading and begging for them to stop doing what they're doing. And they clearly know that they've upset the child and that the child is now could be possibly having, life-threatening injuries or even just being so battered that they need hospital attention, and that the parents would, or the parent would stand there and not realize that what they've done is completely incredibly wrong, never should happen, and that their behavior definitely needs to change because that child, doesn't matter what's going on in their mind, that they thought that they should be able to, allowed to do that to that child, specifically speaking about child abuse here. But, the issue is that if the parents truly love their children, they wouldn't do that to their children, And I don't think they. And if they did do it, the very first time that they did that, and whether they raped their child or sexually used their child, or whether they beat their child or burned their child, scalded their child, or called their child extremely bad names, and pushed them around and intimidate them, and just the violent attitude towards your children, you think that a parent who really truly did love their children would get some help. Because they would see that they've hurt their child, and that it would hurt their heart because they hurt their child, and they would be like, oh my God, I can never ever do this again, and I need to get help, and I need to get help for my child, and I need to make sure that I never ever do this again because I've hurt my child. Well, that's the same way in a domestic violence and abuse situation, right? Whether it's a man or a woman abusing the other partner, you think that if a man loved a woman that much, or a man loved his own partner, a man that much, or if a woman loved her partner that much, a man or a woman, in the situation, that they would see what they're doing to them, and they would want to get help for themselves, because they would be like, my God, I've hurt the person that I love, and how can see, that's why I don't buy that whole I love you thing. You know what I mean? Because it's just BS, garbage, bullshit. Excuse my language. If you truly love somebody, you would not do that to them, because you wouldn't be able to. You'd feel so sick about it. There are abusers out there that cry the blues. I'm sorry. Hey, I've heard this. I've seen it, firsthand. Not in my own case. My parents never apologized for anything they ever did to me or our family or themselves or each other. But friends of mine, these boyfriends that would, this one boyfriend in particular would be like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. He was a drug addict, and he would be apologizing to my friend and saying, oh, I hate myself for what I did to her and all this. And he'd talk to me about it too. And I'd be like, if you really loved her, you would get help. Well, I do love her. No, you really don't. Because if you really did, then you would do something about it. You'd get away from that person until you could learn how to control yourself. Same with parents who, my parents never said they loved us, so it doesn't really matter. My parents were not famous for going around saying they loved us and hugging us and holding us. They were very much famous for kicking the crap out of us and for hurting us, right, because they hated us. But the thing is that, so I didn't deal with that. I didn't have a parent who came up to me and said, oh, I love you one day, and then beat the shit out of me the next. My parents were always assholes. Excuse my language. They were always abusers. They were not, if there wasn't any abuse, there certainly wasn't any love. They didn't, there weren't days where it was just blissful happiness in the home. Everybody was happy and, oh, I love you, and oh, my kids are so wonderful. No, there was none of that, and maybe that's possibly why I kind of came out of it a little bit better than some people might have, because I wasn't fooled into believing one day that my parents loved me, and as a child, and then fooled into this, and then the reality that they didn't love me because they were hurting me. Both of my parents were abusing me in every way, so except for sexually. But I was a sibling of mine that did that. But my parents were both very abusive, and they never came back and said, "Oh, I love you," one day after beating the crap out of me. They really made it very clear that they didn't love any of their children and that they didn't want any of us. See, and the courts were going to take us out of the home. I don't know why they didn't let us go. Pretty much, my mom. The reason she didn't let us go is because she didn't want to be made out to look like a bad mother, because her mother was extremely horrible. Right? I talk about my grandmother all the time, and my grandmother, her mother was a murderer. She murdered her own son. What she did was she horsewhipped him and then made him sleep in a barn in the middle of the winter in Canada when it gets really cold, and he got pneumonia and he died. So she was responsible for his death. Let's just say that. And so she was a horrible woman, and that was my uncle that she killed, and I, of course, I never met him. My mom was, a teenager at the time, and my grandma was just a horrible woman and abused all of her children and her husband and my mom and these orphans that came to stay with her. My mom said there was about 10 orphans, around 9 or 10 orphans that would be at the farm at any time from this orphanage, because the orphanage was overflowing back in the 1930s. And my grandmother beat all them too, and they all split. The orphans took off. They ran down the road, and they just took their chances. They said, we're not going back to the orphanage. Excuse me. My voice is going. They said my mom said that these orphans said they were just leaving, and they were just going because my grandmother was beating everybody up, like dogs, right? Well, my grandmother was a horrible woman. I have nothing good to say about her at all. And so the thing is that, here's my mom knowing how that feels, what it's like to be abused, and then for her to treat me that way, knowing that, when you have a child cowering on the floor trying to protect themselves, from being critically injured, and crying and pleading for somebody to stop, and begging somebody to stop hurting you, you know what I mean? Whether, whatever the beatings or the, kicking you or whatever they're doing, you'd think that parent would realize, oh my God, look what I'm doing to my child, especially when the blood starts to flow. When there's blood all over the place, a parent should really be able to realize that what they have done is extremely wrong. You know what I mean? And for my mom, it wasn't a problem for her to spill my blood, right? And that's a serious issue, and that's, that's why I just, but she didn't come back later and say, oh, I just love you, and, you're just such the most wonderful daughter, and play these head games with me. She just kept me on a steady diet of, I hate your guts, I wish I would have killed you when you were born, and I didn't want you in the first place, and now I'm going to kick your ass and make you pay for it. So that was my mom, and it was always very much the same attitude in our home. So maybe that's possibly why I survived as well as I did, because there was no playing games with, as far as making me believe that they loved me and then go and do this stuff to me. It was really actually quite just a steady diet of abuse. But the thing is that people do this. They will tell their partners, they'll tell their wives, their husbands, their children, oh, I love you, I didn't mean to hurt you, and then, I would never do that, I would never do that again, and then they do it again, And they tell them right to their face, too, while they're sitting on the bed sobbing and, crying the blues, feeling sorry for themselves, even though they've just beat the crap out of their husband or wives or called them names or made them feel like crap, treating them so horribly, throwing them out of the house, who knows what, any number of things, right? And then, or raping them, right? And then sitting on the bed crying, feeling sorry for themselves. My dad was kind of like that. But he was like that because of his sons, my brothers, because he says, "Oh, my sons hate me," and I was thinking, well, he says, "Well, I treated them so badly," and I'm like, "You did, but they don't hate you. But that doesn't mean that what you did was wrong." This was when I was older, and I would talk to my dad. Sick bunch of people who think that they can do this to their family members, whether it's the husbands and wives or whether it's the parents beating on the children or hurting their children, killing their children day in and day out. This is very, very sad. And abuse is a choice, and it's a learned behavior. And if that's why it's very important for survivors. If you have been abused, you make sure that you do not abuse your own children, because if you do, shame on you for not getting help and using that sick, sorry, lame excuse of, oh, I was abused, so that's why I did this to my child. Or I was abused, that's why I do this to my wife or my husband or my girlfriend or my boyfriend, right? There's no excuse for this. There's absolutely no excuse for abuse, right? People do what they do. They choose to do it. And, it's incredibly wrong. And it will never be right. And I don't see how anybody who could possibly treat anyone they say they love, treat them like crap, and then go and say, oh, I love you. That is such a farce. What it is they love themselves. And they are trying to it's a codependency thing. You know what I mean? They just keep you around and use you for their own needs. And they do not love you. They love themselves. Or they would not be hurting you, because that is people say, oh, they don't love themselves. Well, yes, they do. They probably have an extremely high regard for themselves, and that's why they're doing what they're doing, and feeling justified about doing it. And then play this game of, oh, I love you, I would never hurt you, and then 2 months later they're beating the crap out of these people again, putting them in the hospital, knocking their teeth out, and, raping them. I mean, this just makes me sick, and this is incredibly wrong. The next section of this is myths about children in homes where abuse is occurring. And we'll just start this. There's only three here, so we'll finish this up tomorrow. Myth number 29, children aren't affected by the abuse, especially if they don't see it or experience it themselves. That's a myth. Children aren't affected by the abuse, especially if they don't see it or experience it themselves. The reality, children may still hear the violence occurring and or feel the inherent tension that exists in a household where abuse is happening. And children can be affected behaviorally, cognitively, emotionally, physically, or socially by living in an abusive home, and the effects can last a lifetime. And I like what Dave Decker said here, because it's so true. Once a child has to live through that, and especially if they live through that year after year after year after year, and it wasn't just a one-time episode. Even a one-time episode can send a child, to have problems for the rest of their life. But you can imagine somebody who grows up in that and the psychological damage that's done from that. The behavioral problems, just cognitively knowing that this is happening, and then they'll have all, they can have emotional problems, physical, the whole thing. It affects them in every way, right? And people think, oh, well, it's just me and my partner fighting, and the kids aren't being abused. They're in their rooms hiding and playing their music because we're out here fighting. Well, they will be affected by it, whether they're in the middle of it or not. And they may not even witness it, but they might hear it. And they may not even hear it, but they can feel the tension. You can feel the tension when people are fighting. You can feel the tension. You can cut it with a knife. It's so thick, right? I don't know if you people would know what it's like to be in a situation where somebody is threatening someone's life. Holding a knife to their throat, or slamming their head into the walls, and they're about ready to lose consciousness. And the tension is so thick, and and it makes everybody panic. And the trauma from that is incredibly horrible. And if children witness that, and children are part of that, what it does to them is irreversible. Honestly, you can't ever get back that innocence. You can't ever get back that peace in your heart, really, because once it's destroyed, then they have to learn to live with it. So that's why you do not want to have your children around this situation, and you don't want to abuse your children. So make sure that as parents, that you don't abuse your children and don't keep them in an unhealthy situation, right? Get them some help, and get them to a safe place. So take care, everybody. We have about 10 seconds left. Thanks for being here. I appreciate everybody who's tuning into my shows. We'll finish the rest of this up tomorrow, same time, same place. I'll be on tonight and my own show as well as Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. And so thanks a lot for being here. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. If you need any information that I have, be sure and let me know on Blog Talk Radio, or you can contact me on Facebook or wherever. I'm around. If I can get any information for you, please let me know. And thanks a lot for being here, everybody. Get some help. Reach out and get some help. If you're suffering in silence and just suffering on your own, and you're just feeling like I can't do this, well, you can. There's so many of us who have been there. We've been to the edge. We've been in hell, and we climbed out of that pit, and have gotten some help. And it's very important for you to get some help and reach out, and don't suffer in sadness and silence and sorrow, right? It's so incredibly horrible. If you have to, call a crisis line. Just call somebody anonymously. Just talk to somebody, right? And make sure you keep reaching out and stay with us and get some help. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.